Anyhow, I have a great question when it comes to all this Disney business and stuff like that. If we could take a minute, I should
Yeah,
probably
go
say.
for it. We'll get back to
Um,
super chats and everything, but go for it because this is the perfect time for that question.
as you can see, yeah, Chuck has been in the industry for quite some time, and from your perspective, how has the industry changed, the comic book industry, that is, since movies have kind of become the thing, right? Like, we had Batman, we had Superman, we had a few far between here and there, but when X-Men came along, things kind of changed, right? You had
Yeah.
X-Men, you had Spider-Man, and from there on out, it's basically been the superhero era in Hollywood. Has that affected the industry overall from your perspective?
Well, I mean, it had a deleterious effect because, when I got into the comic book business, everybody who wanted in the comic book business just wanted to work in comics. We were all lifers.
Hmm.
I wanted to just write comics. I didn't want to move on to write, screenplays or novels or any of the rest. I was, comics were in my DNA. That's what I wanted to do. And everybody else the same way, artists and editors. And when the movies came along, we saw a new breed of creators show up who saw comics as a roadmap or a stepping stone to something quote unquote better. And also, you saw editors who were so naive that they thought that if they did like favors for the parent companies, that they would be rewarded with jobs in the film and television divisions, which is laughable. Uh, the old guard editors were retiring and they were replaced by these new guys who wanted to be in on the Hollywood game. And then they began running the companies as if they were Hollywood studios with more micromanaging and the comic book equivalent of reshoots, things that had never existed in comics before. I mean, they were doing rewrites on comic books, which is like, wow, that's crazy. These are comic books. You write the script, you send it off, the artist draws it, that's the end of it. You don't have a committee sitting around saying, well, we should move this panel over here and that panel over there. It had a horrible effect.
Did you notice a lot more micromanaging on the
Oh
characters?
yeah, particularly at DC. And then and then and there was no good effect because the movies didn't even raise sales for us, so there was no upside to any of it.
Well, and I also imagine now currently it's a bigger problem of, if a kid wants to go in and see like a Hawkeye or a Captain America comic or even an Iron Man comic, no longer are those characters actually those characters. Like Iron Man has actually been taken over by Ironheart. Hawkeye is now, what's her face, Kate Bishop, and so on and so forth. Like, to me, I think it is kind of counterproductive when you have all these superheroes and then you're trying to change who they are ostensibly in the comics. And you're right, like that's kind of what got me into comics was knowing who Superman was from the movies as a young child, and then finally, making that connection, and that's how I learned about Spider-Man and some of these other characters who had only had like a few television series and stuff like that when I was younger. So it feels like the world had ballooned at that point in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I got to imagine just being somebody who's on the inside, it just had to be polarizing at the same time as like a weird change in how the dynamic worked in the system itself.
Well, I mean, you look at when DC started putting out facsimile editions, they were, completely accurate reprints of comics from the 80s and the 70s and the 60s, and they were outselling their regular output because here were the classic presentations of those heroes. And the editor in chief complained about them selling more than the regular new comics. And it's like, okay, you're complaining about it, but aren't the readers telling you something?
Yeah.
They want you to go back to the classic depictions of these characters and stop screwing with them.
It almost feels like deja vu. Well, and it does. In a weird way, it feels like comic book characters since the 70s into the early part of the 80s have been stunted. I mean, we have a lot of great characters come out of the early 90s, late 80s that are brand new, and kind of newer incarnations of some of them, don't get me wrong. I mean, that's a Marvel age that I remember fondly, of course. But of course, like my memories of DC, like you're right, like the Superman that I gravitate towards is the pre 80s Superman, right? Same thing with Batman and some of these other characters. Like, yeah, I like a little bit of Frank Miller in my Batman, but I don't like it all dour and dark and depressing and making Superman a fascist and all this other crap. It's like, sometimes we got to have a little hope in these things. Or a character like Batman makes no sense if he's not. You can have him dark and dour, but he has to be trying to reach for some sort of light, right? Like that's kind of the whole point of the character, I would think, at the end of the day. Like he wants to make things better.
Oh, you're such a Pollyanna.
Well, I try.
Well, my theory is that the Batman, it was so darkly lit they could have released it as a podcast. They really didn't have to shoot anything. They could have saved an awful lot of money.
Oh yeah.
So, you know what? There's something. I don't know whether anyone's learning any kind of lessons. But I mean, I go to the comic book store and try to buy things. They're certainly less interesting for the most part. There's still some phenomenal comic book cover artists. So you go there and you say, okay, this might be the gay Hawkeye or something or whatever, something weird, but you go, wow, that cover, it's really good. There are some very good artists out there, which I love. I love the artwork in the comic books, which is one of the themes that I'm writing in the video that I'm going to be releasing today. Is I realized I don't have superhero fatigue. I have a regular human being in tights fatigue, because it dawned on me that apart from the fact that I've been advocating that the superhero movies need to get more street level and less bombastic and less trying to save the galaxy stuff, I also realized that, ironically, once you put humans in, that's a style. You can't really alter the way the human looks. You can go a Tim Burton route or Christopher Nolan-ish route, but you like the variety in anime or the variety between Ty Templeton versus Neil Adams, or one of the things that you enjoyed about the different comics is when a specific artist took them over, and that had its own style and look. I mean, independent of the writing, which Chuck, I know you know a lot about. You can't do that with human beings. I'm finding it's the human beings that are boring. I'm missing the arts. I'm going to be covering that hopefully in a video today. I've got human being fatigue.
Yeah, I agree with you that, these things need to be a little bit more reality based. I mean, not necessarily reality, but showing them coexisting in a real world, which increasingly they don't do. They're in their own pocket reality.
Yeah,
there's no mail delivered. There's no policeman on the street.
Correct.
There's no babies. There's no anything.
It's lacking authenticity because again, like the
violence happens and no
of,
police show up. Like an entire building is flattened and no one, like, where's the emergency?
We're the first
basically, Paul,
right?
what you're requesting is for Marvel to adapt Chuck Dixon's Punisher. That would
that would be brilliant. or even just rerun forever a Netflix a Daredevil. Like, don't make any more. Just rerun the first season. That's a perfect street level character and executed. And that was the problem with Ant-Man. Ant-Man naturally is a street level superhero.
Right.
And then they put him in the quantum realm. It was the dumbest decision. That first Ant-Man movie, that was your blueprint. Do not stray from that blueprint.
Well, I mean, I used to have this argument all the time at both DC and Marvel that, because they would say, well, you have these superheroes dealing with quality of life crimes, stopping a carjacking or whatever. And I'm like, readers love that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the wish fulfillment fantasy. I'm never going to fight Dr. Doom, but I'd love to foil a convenience store robbery.
Well, I mean,
I'd like to be the guy that can do that.
I want to get after those telemarketers.
There you go.
Go ahead, Paul.
No, I was just going to say there. I mean, if you watch Hong Kong and Chinese martial arts movies, there's always the hero beating up a bunch of thugs in a convenience store.
Yeah.
It's the classic It's the classic moment. They all have it. That's a very important part of Asian culture. You know,
Well,
a bunch of guys.
it's even in a
going
lot of American films, right? Like,
Yes.
True too, but they probably got it from the Asian films. But the convenience store angle, I think it was in Venom.
well, everything
that's
from
the
the
important thing.
from the first person that Travis Bickle kills in Taxi Drivers in a convenience store to the first person RoboCop takes down is in a convenience store. So I mean, yeah, you're not wrong in that respect.
There's
Yeah,
something.
there was a Punisher story I wanted to write. They would never let me write it, where Frank reads in the newspaper that guys are stealing carry-on bags from the men's rooms at airports. You know, when you hang your carry-on bag on the hook on the back of the stall door.
Right.
And people were, I read about this myself, people were reaching over and grabbing the bag. And I want to do a story where Frank just sits in a stall at the airport with a shotgun across his knees.
Jeez.
Because that's who he is.
I'd read the hell out of that story. Like
Yeah.
Can't you like write that the same way that you? No, you probably can't because of the copyright situation. But I'd freaking love to see that character as that story written, because that would be amazing.
Because I mean, I was inspired a lot of the aspects of the Punisher. I was inspired by the novel that Death Wish was based on, and at the end of the novel, which the end is chilling, and he's scared all the criminals so much that the crime rate in Manhattan goes down to 0. And so he has to be hunting for new crimes. And he begins hunting kids who throw rocks at commuter trains.
Oh,
yeah.
Like,
The book is a lot more darker than the film.
I never read the book. How did you like the Netflix Punisher?
I only saw a little bit of it. He seemed a bit weepy to me. I mean, this is a guy whose post-traumatic stress disorder is always going to be in the future. He's not going to deal with any of that. He has no time. Everything he does is a distraction, so he doesn't have to be left alone with the horrors of his own mind.
Yeah, I've never really thought about that aspect too much of the character, but that's true, I guess. Yeah.
But that's how they want to write things. They think that the inner struggle has to constantly boil to the surface, or it's not going to be dramatic enough. And script can talk to that more than me, but it drives me nuts. There was a series on Netflix called Kung Fu Nun or something like that, a Ninja Nun or something like
Warrior
that.
Nun, yeah.
Warrior Nun. And it took to the, like, I thought it was an interesting premise, and it was shot in Europe. It was clear that it was a financed European experience where they had, there's that Italian actor. It was from Germany. That guy's from Germany because Germany put some money in. I mean, those of us who are from Canada know these multinational.
Oh yeah, we're very familiar with those productions.
And the thing is, though, we waited to the very end for her to kind of glom onto what her superpower was. I was like, give me a break. Okay, first episode gets her superpower, then she's like kicking ass. The rest of the series. I'm
dealing with the consequences of having that power and the escalation that comes with it. Like that's good character stuff. That's what I for once, going back to Chuck, your story of Punisher just sitting in a bathroom with a shotgun. I can just see a guy banging on the stall, being like, "Are you gonna come out? It's been 20 minutes." And all he does is racking shotgun. He's like, "Okay, never mind. I'll go somewhere else."
Boy, what did you have for lunch?
Yeah. Hey, mister, are you okay? It's like, you need some kaopectate or something?
Like, it's just airport security. Like, are you all right? Like, do I...
My wife might have some X-Lax. Do you want me to check?
I like my heroes neat. I like my heroes without a tragic, psychotic, strange background. I mean, I prefer days when, John Wayne or Bogart came on the screen and then we learned about them by what they did. And we really didn't care where they were the day before they showed up in the movie.
But that's not modern writing. Look at
this. Unfortunately, you're right.
It's taken to a new level where all they can do is talk about their sexuality on board.
And or how much of a victim they are, right? Yeah.
Which is so lazy. I mean, that's got nothing to do with plot. It's got nothing to do with story. I mean, I hate it when we go, "Oh, this is character driven." Oh, so you didn't bother to think of a plot. Because plot are hard.
Well, that's the other part too. They conflate character driven and plot driven because they're. You put me any really well written story, I can tell you how it's character driven because it's got a good plot. Because a good character drives the plot. If you do something that's just plot driven, it usually means you have a bad character and it's just a plot that's happening and they're just being dragged through the series of events and there's not much unity. when it comes to like the concept of the hero is someone that potentially could be a victim, but refuses to accept being a victim and decides to persevere and overcome that, and to show you that, oh yeah, this bad thing happened to me, but I'm just not going to, dwell on it. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to be active participant in my own destiny. And that's what makes the hero the hero. When as soon as you put them in a state of arrested development, you're not telling a story. You're just bitching with your friends at the coffee table, like an episode of.
And I'm going to bring it up again. Then you need to watch Chloe on the German show on Netflix. Holy smokes! It is 100% what you guys are talking about.
Well, and what Script has been saying is something that we've been saying for a while, and I say the same thing about the villains, and that's part of the problem with these movies now, right? Is that a lot of these writers can only seem to sympathize or empathize with these villains, and it's like, that says a lot more about you than it does anything, because these villains are villains for a reason, right? It's exactly what Script said. They are the same exact thing as the hero, only the difference is those things that make them a victim, they act out upon them, right? And they take them out on everybody around them. That's what makes them a villain. And a lot of these people writing this stuff, that's the kind of people they relate to, sadly, right? Like they see that as, oh, I understand how Dr. Doom feels. It's like, you fucking shouldn't. It's like, you should not want to be.
You should be able to relate to them on some level. So they
right, but not in the sense that be like trying to make them out to be this anti-hero thing. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's a difference between understanding and then trying to sympathize, because those two don't always have to be in sync. You can understand Dr. Doom. He's a son of a gypsy. His mother has died. He's trying to win back her soul, and he's doing everything he can to sort of save her and then also control this country so that it can be, his ideals. And every time he reaches out to grab more power for his own goals, he's doing it at the expense of others for his own selfish gain. You can understand that, and you can kind of sympathize with it. But the thing is, you don't empathize with it. You don't feel sorry for him. You're just like, oh, I understand what he's doing, but I don't agree with the way he's pursuing, his actions and his goals. That's evil. That's abuse. That's perversion. Those are the things that we want to be able to identify and be like, yes, I'd love to hate this guy, or I'd love to see, the evil stuff that he does. And I'd love to see getting the comeuppance by the superheroes for thwarting his plan. And hopefully maybe he'll be able to redeem himself, but we know it's never going to be, because he's so stubborn in his ways and whatnot. And that's kind of what makes, an interesting villain entertaining and threatening at the same time.
Exactly.
I mean, I always use the example of at the end of Rear Window, there's a moment where you actually feel a little sorry for the Raymond Burr character. Just a moment before he tries to kill Jimmy Stewart. And that just, and up to this point, we really knew nothing about this guy. So the first time we see him, he's basically saying, why are you doing this to me? Like, he's the victim. And that's such a great moment, because it really makes him real. I mean, if he just came through the door and started tearing ass up immediately, it wouldn't have been anywhere near as interesting.
It would have been anticlimactic, actually.
Yeah.
Right. Another example of that is, I just brought up, Taxi Driver earlier. That's another example where you have a character who's clearly not somebody you're supposed to be rooting for as the hero throughout the film, but yet at the same time, you find this despicable human being doing the right thing at the end for this, 12-year-old girl. So like, it's like, well, does one undo the other? I don't know. Like, that's a complicated hero, right? Like, that's somebody who, you can actually get into that and wax about it a little bit. To these people, they think Thanos is right. But I'm also getting to the point where I can understand why Thanos would do what he did too.
Yeah, I'm feeling very Thanos these days. Although one of the most interesting and most complex protagonist was the Rutger Hauer character in Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Roy Batty.
Yeah.
So that was very satisfying on so many levels. And he was told he needs to be. So who was the bad guy? I mean, it was just an amazing movie. It's why the studios forced the director to add the narration, because the initial test audiences, everyone was rooting for Rutger Hauer. They were sympathizing with him way too much, according to the studio. But what was wrong?
What was wrong with that?
That's
how they took the movie.
Well, not only that, Roy Batty and his cohorts are not actually really villains. They're just they have a singular goal, which is that they want to survive. They cherish the aspect of life. And then you find out that they're really just treated as product from a corporation.
Well, that's why you sympathized with them.
Exactly. That's why. And they're not really doing anything wrong other than they're trying to survive. But they're being hunted because of who they are, which is inconsequential to what they become. That's why Blade Runner is such a fascinating movie to watch.
Well, basically, the message is that the machines in that film are more human and humane than the humans are, basically.
Yep. It's again, it's not your classic.
But they can't do that kind of messaging anymore, right? Like, that's the biggest problem, is they don't even understand fundamentally any of that crap. The discussions we just had about those 3 or 4 stories right now, they wouldn't even be able to understand.
No.
Right? Like, they wouldn't get it.
But audiences get it.
Yes. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Well, and there's the disconnect right there, right?
What?
I said, and there's the disconnect right there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, you talked about 1%ers and their yachts and their, condominiums in Malibu. I mean, it's like, I mean, what, they don't relate to us. They don't, they obviously think we're the great unwashed.
And it's interesting, those individuals who have chosen to make movies like Wall Street or about the very wealthy, no one has ever really made a movie of the very wealthy that I've met. The really super very wealthy, no one's done that. Like, they kind of sort of tried to do it in the triangle of sadness, but they were just parodies. But that is interesting. How come no one's made a movie about that level of individual who hobnobs with the UN secretaries of state and extracts oil deals? And I mean, these are people.
Yeah, the 1%ers of the 1%ers. Well, I think part of the reason is that a lot of the writers that do talk about the rich or behave as if they're rich are not. They're actually pretty poor. They just don't want to admit it. So that's why they emulate and address subjects that they think the people in that particular class grasp onto.
And how do you make fun of them? Anyways, that's a completely different.
How do you make fun of them? A Prince and Pauper type story, but against their will.
I think Preston Sturges did a pretty good job.
Yeah, good old Preston Sturges. We need him back.
We need more of that. Yeah.
Now I just want a Punisher story where he's stuck in a stall at the bathroom. At the airport.
All right,
stuck in a stall at the airport in the bathroom. Yes.
Yeah, I really want that story too. I mean, you came back to Conan, which we'll talk about in a moment here, and you need to come back to the Punisher as well. They kind of made a ninja in Marvel these days. Take his guns away.
Punisher movement. That's what it'll be called.
Well, and it doesn't even matter why he's there, right? He could be waiting for a specific individual to come in the bathroom or whatever. It doesn't freaking matter. Like, that's the whole.
Whoever reaches over that door is getting it.
Is dead. He's done.
And he doesn't even have to worry about bathroom breaks while he's waiting. So
exactly. You got he can, and he turns around and he can have a sandwich. He's got a nice little station there,
Yeah, he's got
It
thermos.
might not be too hygienic, but I can.
Hey, you got to make do when you got to make do.
He is a slob hero, so he's right at home.
I knew Paul would like that one.
I like that one. That's good.